people are not fixed beings, that we are dynamic beings. I think holding on to that belief in the possibility of humans changing and having transformational change, like unexpected transformational change, is what will, that belief, that faith in humanity to change uh, in a network, I think might coalesce into some type of synergistic energy that allows a cultural transformation within healthcare.
Welcome to Safe Space Made Simple, a practical podcast that guides clinical leaders and healthcare managers to create trust and support with their teams. I'm your host, Trace Hobson. Join me for weekly interviews, practical tools, and inspiring transformational stories of bringing people together in healthcare. Now, let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Safe Space Made Simple. My name is Trace Hobson. I'm your host, and I'm looking forward to today's episode where I interview Lawrence Yang. Lawrence is a physician who specializes in primary care and is also a clinical consultant. Lawrence takes a very different approach as a physician in British Columbia to the way that he shows up with his patients. He talks specifically about the therapeutic value of presence and what the impact of that can be on his patients as well as systemic trauma. I know you're going to enjoy this episode, so without further ado, let's get right into the show. Lawrence, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm really excited to interview you and get your perspectives. I think to start off with, it would be great to just hear who you are and the work that you're doing in the world right now.
Well, thanks, Trace. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm a family doctor in Surrey, British Columbia, and um, I'm doing a lot of work clinically as well as in the quality improvement space. So that means kind of facilitating workshops on with healthcare teams, trying to get them to ideate around how they might improve their workplaces. Yeah, and that includes workflow processes as well as workplace culture. So we're speaking of
Mm,
leadership, presence, therapeutic self, those types of concepts in my workshops. And I do all sorts of public speaking engagements over the past 5 years, it seems, around these topics like healthcare culture, as well as healing in general, in a holistic sense.
mm. Thank you for your work. I appreciate that. It's really it's refreshing to hear a physician who is engaged on that level because I think that and nothing against physicians. I think part of the big problem that I see is that physicians are incredibly busy. So the fact that you're carving out time to do cultural work, leadership development work, I really appreciate that. I want to acknowledge that. One of the things that I work on is systemic distress and some of the things that can happen inside of organizations and whole systems that are trauma organized. And I'm curious, what kind of work do you do that's related to sort of the ongoing challenges we have with stress and with even trauma as well? And
Hmm.
what have you learned in your work, and what can you share with us?
Yeah. So you know what? A lot of this grew out of my a lot of my motivation, and my public speaking stuff grew out of what I've noticed in the clinical space. So in my clinical space as a family practitioner, I get to work pretty closely with people of all different backgrounds, the melting pot that is British Columbia. And I get to sit in spaces with people in very vulnerable situations, and I notice the impact of psychological trauma. I actually call it psychospiritual trauma because
Mm,
I have a spiritual leaning in how I look at the world, like my worldview, and and I can see that it impacts their physical health. I can see the linkages between trauma and the limitations that trauma puts on people's identities, and it's almost like handcuffs some of their ability to be creative and adaptive as they lean into challenges in their lives, whether they're relational challenges or economic or yeah, relational challenges, really, most of the time. And
mm,
that impacts us as clinicians too. As a family physician, I'm exposed to a lot of emotional strife, and empathically, I can take on a lot of distress. So you said kind of the distress that happens in organizations. I think that every healthcare organization is very vulnerable to
mhm,
to accumulated compounding distress over time. And if we don't recognize that and have methodologies or intentional processes to release or relieve or resolve that distress, we can become ill ourselves as healers in the healing professions. So
Mhm.
yeah, becoming acutely aware of that, having lived experience of that type of empathic distress, that's really what drove me into a lot of my work. Mhm.
Mhm. Mm. As you're talking, I'm just appreciating the fact that you're even slowing down to notice this. Like, first of all, as I said earlier, physicians seem to be, and in reality, the ones that I work with are saying they are just maxed out. And so as I'm hearing you talk, the story I have is that you made a decision to slow down to spend time with your patients. How did you get to that decision? Because I know the pressure that must be immense for you to see more patients all the time. So how are you slowing down to actually do that? And how did you accomplish that?
Well, you know what? I don't know if I've really slowed down, but I think we can kind of you can't really dilate time, but time becomes more meaningful when we are fully present as humans, as spiritual beings having these physical experiences and in relationships. And so by kind of dropping into a mindful space when I'm with someone, being fully present and attuned to their emotional experience as well as the content that they're sharing with me, and really validating the experiences that are being shared within the clinical space that I'm working in, I'm able to kind of experience a more meaningful time with the patient, even when
Mhm.
the times are short. So
Yeah.
my encounters with my patients continue to be between 10 to 15 minutes because that's what the financial structure of our compensation allows within primary care, often in our system. And it's unfortunate that that's how the structure is, but
Mm.
the lack of family physicians in our system kind of demands that we have throughput. Throughput has to be a
Yeah.
part of. So I have not actually been able to achieve an extension. Like I would love to spend an hour with my patients. I just
Mhm.
can't. Just can't. But I can make the most of that time by being present and then delegating other people to help me with the clerical tasks that every family physician find very frustrating. Most family physicians find the relational stuff very rewarding. Being able
Mhm.
to be present and to be a therapeutic presence for someone gives us a lot of compassion satisfaction. But it's the clerical stuff that can actually really burn us out and feels
Mhm.
sometimes feels out of alignment with what we find most meaningful. And so I've had to redesign my workspace to allow for me to be more sustainable in this challenging work environment.
Your use of some of your language is warming my heart because presence-based system work is everything that I do. And as you talk about therapeutic presence, I wonder if you could just share a little bit more about
Mm.
what you mean by that and what the impact of that is with the people that you're working with.
A lot of when I conceptualize it, I think a lot about the research that John Bowlby did in the 70s and his research partners around attachment, and it speaks really to how a developing nervous system requires attunement to feel safe, and how uh, a human in their development learns to self-regulate their own nervous systems. Um, by having that modeled by another person, having
Mhm.
a calm presence, a calm stable adult presence is so key to us kind of being able to be resilient and ride and to learn the skills to manage our own nervous system so that we can ride the challenging waves that is life. And so as an adult and in the healing professions as a clinician, I attempt to attune to my patients and really listen deeply to understand what their challenges are in the content that the narrative that they're sharing with me when they need to offload some of the stresses that they're dealing with, and when they express the problems that they hope that I can help with. So I just try to attune to that and really listen, being present. So kind of allowing myself to relieve myself of the historical ideas that might be jumbling my mind, and trying to stay in the moment rather than thinking about what I need to do next. I do
Mm.
have a little bit of my processing power holding on to the timing I have, and that is a pressure that I can't seem to figure out how to avoid. But
I think we're all trying to figure that one out, Lawrence.
so I'll say when I sit down, what would you like to focus on in the next 15 minutes?
Right.
That might be
Right.
day. And then I'm just really present. And then I validate the emotions that I'm hearing, that I'm reading in between the lines of the words the patients are saying. That
Mm.
validation is a therapeutic exchange. And I think it is at the core of healing, that being
Mhm.
present with another suffering, really. So that is probably the most effective healing modality that I have. And then
Yeah.
I got prescribing, and then I got referring on to specialists. But that therapeutic presence and interaction is the bread and butter of my work.
Yeah, I really really love what you're sharing about now, because if you look at some of the work of like Dr. Stephen Porges, for instance, who talks about polyvagal theory and polyvagal safety, the co-regulative effect that happens with people, it does seem to give us access to wholeness, to healing that otherwise has been interrupted or fragmented at some point. And this is where we kind of get back to what we were talking about earlier about trauma. Hey, everybody, we're just going to take a quick break so that I can tell you a little bit about a resource that I created for you that's free of charge, that helps you to be able to generate a safe space if you're working as a leader or a manager or an executive in healthcare. You know as well as I do that is so many challenges that it's sometimes difficult to know how to operationalize things like psychological health and safety or well-being, especially when you have barely enough time to breathe, let alone do that. How do I do this? Well, I decided to create the Tiny Steps Safe Space Challenge, which is a one-on-one coaching challenge that's done during lunch hour, where you can come, and it's just for one person at a time. So the space is very limited, but I'm going to guide individuals through five different sessions that will teach them exactly how to generate a safe space in circumstances that where that feels really difficult. On day one, we'll cover how to generate a safe space in complex clinical cultures. On day two, how to generate a safe space with teams on the floor. Day three will be three-step systemic coaching that makes a difference, that actually sticks. Day four will be being congruent to reduce burnout for you and your team. And day five is succession that fills roles and shifts and progresses your career. So this will be done in a very different way. This is not an educational or didactic experience. It's a somatic and systemic coaching experience using a modality of coaching that I call safe space systemic coaching. If you'd like to experience this, this is a very limited offer that I'll be doing for a select few people. So it'll be first come, first serve. Click on the link and check out the webpage that I created for this so that you can get any of your questions answered, or that you can get some more information. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the show. In some of the work that I do, I'm noticing that there is anecdotal evidence that every human being's nervous system has the ability within a space that's safe to process and address that fragmented trauma that was kind of broken off of the system at one point or another. And in a safe space, it wants to naturally coalesce back. That's been my discovery. And it's actually the subject of graduate research that I'm doing right now, too. So when you talk about the therapeutic value or presence of what you're doing, I'm wondering, as you watch people experiencing your presence in the way you just described, what are some of the things that are happening that you notice?
Yeah, I'll notice people's body tension relax. Their nonverbal cues show a sense of relaxation. So somebody might actually enter my room trembling because of maybe they're even thinking and anticipating the interaction with a medical professional and having anxiety. And then when I model or mirror to them that I'm in a calm, present space, I can naturally see their tremors reduce. I can see their breathing rate reduce. I'll notice the pace of their language slows down so that it comes to a more, yeah, a more calm pace. So those
Hmm.
are the things that I can observe. and it gives me cues that I'm in the right space, that I'm in the right space,
Right.
and that the
Right.
patient feels safe. And so, yeah, as you said, safety is key for people to naturally heal. There is a natural resilience in every organism's physiology and makeup. There's a leaning towards healing. That
Mhm.
in the healing professions, we just need to hold that space or facilitate that healing to naturally occur, and that's what most of my work is.
Giving me hope for physicians, man. I'll tell you, I thank you so much for sharing this perspective because I've never heard a doctor talk like this. And oftentimes I've observed, as I said earlier, that physicians are so pressed for time that many of them, again, it's my story, aren't really present. They're kind of just getting through the checklist and getting on to the next thing. And so it makes me really curious. How did you arrive at this? Because, like you look at your journey and you mentioned your lived experience. How did you sort of break through into your own healing so that you could create a space like you're describing?
I think that's key, Trace. I think going through our own healing, doing our own inner work
Mhm.
is how we create capacity for the healing of others, for holding space. I think that space holders, people who intentionally hold space for others, we need enough spaciousness and capacity within ourselves to do that. So I think just being someone who is contemplative, open to reflecting, open to being vulnerable, open to being my own humanity, and then
Mhm.
um, learning about self compassion. I think learning about self compassion was key
Hmm.
uh, to be able to be kind to myself. And when I'm able to be kind to myself, I'm able to be more honest with myself that I am wounded as a human going through life that is challenging. And then seeing my woundedness, being able to ask for help through therapy, through,
Mhm.
through group healing activities, personal development, maybe spiritual practices, mindfulness, meditation. So those are the methodologies that I use to create space. And also,
Mhm.
I create safety for myself. I've become aware of my unmet needs. So sometimes my unmet needs have to do with uh, my self care. Maybe I need exercise and more movement. Maybe I need more sleep. Maybe
Mhm.
better nutrition. Maybe I need fresh fruits. Maybe I need hydration. So by attending to my needs naturally, my nervous system becomes more regulated. There's a I facilitate my own healing, and then once I'm in a space where I have adequate capacity, my empathic capacity actually grows, and with that empathic capacity, I can exercise compassionate caring a lot better. And so
Mhm.
it's just going through our own journeys. And I know that
Yeah.
what blocks a lot of physicians is the denial of their own woundedness.
Yeah.
So when we deny that we have a problem, we're not going to change.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're that's probably a trend you could speak to better than I can, but I know that there's also resistance generally speaking too. Like I just think of my own resistance at times to being vulnerable and I wasn't taught, I don't think we're taught I think to be vulnerable and to be honest and transparent. I think we're, conditioned to hide those parts of ourselves and that creates all kinds of challenges and then eventually like you're describing, you start to discover self acceptance and self love and the reality that, we're all human beings that are walking through a journey together, shoulder to shoulder. And so I'm just part of that human race and that journey. That's just like everybody else. It's so refreshing as you're talking. I'm finding myself regulating, even getting a deep breath as I'm hearing you speak. So thank you so much for sharing the way you are. I really appreciate it. Um, and you brought other physicians up. I'm curious, as you work with colleagues and you began to, I'm thinking you must share some of this work with others. What are you discovering as you work with other physicians that are maybe struggling with some of this?
Yeah, I'm noticing the exact same things that that there we have had a almost a surreptitious denial of our own humanity. Like we have somehow attempted as health professionals to set ourselves apart from humanity, that we are hyper resilient, that we are we are some of us are perfectionists, some of us have had to really leverage the harsh internal critic in order to figuratively whip ourselves into performing in our academic competitive culture in order to make it to where we are today. And
Mm-hmm.
the healing that needs to happen to decolonize the body to get back to healing spaces is hard work, and not many people are showing a framework of how to do that.
Mm,
I really think it is through self compassion, because self compassion within it is nested the concept of common humanity. As you said, that we are all humans, whether or not we have an MD after our name, or whether or not we're the premier of the country, the province, or, whatever it is, we are humans. And in that humans have needs. And,
mhm,
it, and when we're honest about what needs are not being met, we have an opportunity to advance and to advance our ability to be healers. So,
mhm,
mm.
mhm.
So,
Yeah, I also really appreciate what you were saying earlier about doing your own work. I've also found that what gives me direct capacity to creating and generating a safe space is my willingness or unwillingness to work on those different, maybe conditioned or blind spots that come up, those areas that I'm not as prone to admit. And when they come up in interactions with other human beings or in relationships or in stress or pressure, I have an invitation. I have an opportunity. And, whether or not I respond to that opportunity and do my own work will then dictate whether or not I can do my work outside of me as well. So I really appreciate the way that you framed that. And I'm curious, if you could kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the healthcare system right now, what are some things that we need to do? What kinds of work do we need to do to decolonize the system, to create places where we nurture the human spirit and we provide safety for people to be their best?
mm, it's hard to zoom out. Like I can see what we need to do for each other yeah, as team members in the health in the healing professions. I can see what an individual might benefit from doing, which is doing the inner work by leaning into what our wounds are, and and then finding pathways or steps towards healing, either through therapy or self exploration, or knowing the self. Really, I can speak to that. At a systems level, I really think it is through kind of uh, as individuals heal themselves, forming networks or alliances uh, of leadership,
Mm,
where in these networks we uphold the principles of being aware of the ubiquity of trauma, how everybody has trauma, and also how everybody has resilience, that natural ability to heal, and that change is possible, and that people are not fixed beings, that we are dynamic beings. I think holding on to that belief in the possibility of humans changing, and having transformational change, like unexpected transformational change, is what will that belief, that faith in humanity to change uh, in a network, I think might coalesce into some type of synergistic energy that allows a cultural transformation within healthcare.
mm,
Um, yeah, but it starts with individuals doing the inner work
yeah.
and then moving into leadership positions in these informal or formal networks of change. Yeah.
So let's just pretend for a moment that you're talking to some clinical leaders in our healthcare system here in Canada.
Mm,
What are a couple of really practical, concrete things that they could do to
mm,
begin to do their own work, their own inner work? What are some things that you could suggest?
Yeah, I think self-compassion meditation is a very powerful thing for some people. But self-compassion can be approached in different ways.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed Dr. Kristen Neff's work, Neff, Dr. Kristen Neff. She has written books on self-compassion,
Yeah.
including Your Self-Compassion, as well as a workbook on self-compassion. So there's a book club you can do for self-compassion that really unlocks that internal capacity, I believe, to be more compassionate in each of our own leadership journeys. And the influence that a compassionate leader can have on a team and organization is amazing. We can actually generate virtuous cycles through our own leadership, and I've witnessed that happening through people who have done their inner work. And so I think healing the self heals the team, and then that goes forward. Other practical things, there are many retreats now on mindfulness and compassion that I think are very valuable. Uh, in the health professional space, there are many leaders who are running retreats. Dr. Ron Epstein's retreats come to mind. Dr. Sarah Leah's in British Columbia's uh, retreats come to mind. Dr. Mark Sherman's retreats come to mind. People typically avoid them because they don't think that there's value within these retreats. But when we're ready to really go inward and to heal ourselves, that's a great time. When you feel you're ready for that,
Mm.
leaning into these kind of relational healing experiences is so key.
Mm.
Often our woundedness, our traumas occur in intimate relationships with our parents, our siblings, with romantic partners. And it often requires healing in relationship uh,
Mhm.
in order to heal those wounds as well. And so
Mhm.
these types of group experiences, they they reaffirm that faith in humanity's ability to change and naturally heal. So
Mm.
those are some of my ideas. Dr. Kristen Neff's work, going to these type of group retreats. Those are some practical steps that one.
Yeah, those are great suggestions, and uh, it would be great to have those in the show notes. So maybe I'll have some links that we can share with the audience after in the show notes for people. So thank you for those really practical, concrete steps that people can take right away. Now, I'm curious, just coming to a close now, what's some work that you're really excited about that you're doing right now, and what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I currently am involved in what's called the Joyful Workplace, which is a really lofty title for the workshops that I'm doing. They're based on the Institute of Healthcare Improvements Leading for Well-Being
Mm.
course. So
Nice.
through the literature on organizations, kind of what are the pillars that leaders in healthcare need to try to facilitate safety, autonomy, sense of purpose, community, and equity, and recognition. Like, so there's some action planning that teams can do within these workshops. So, how do you contact me? I'm on most social media platforms as Gateway Medic. There was a SkyTrain station, which is our local metro system here in British Columbia, and it was called Gateway Medical Center. And my clinic was right next to it for about 12 years. And so I became Gateway Medic. So at Gateway Medic on X as well as on Instagram. On Facebook, you'll find me as Lawrence Yang. And I'm engaging regularly on all those platforms as well as LinkedIn, which
Okay,
is
great. So we'll put the LinkedIn link into the show notes as well, Lawrence. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking to you. And thank you for the work that you're doing in British Columbia. I really appreciate the work that you're doing and happy to hear just the tone and the way that you're showing up with patients and with me today in this conversation. So thank you so much for your time.
thank you, Trace.
Thank you so much for listening today. And if you'd like to reach out to Lawrence, you can do that by clicking on the links in the show notes. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or by email. And I'll look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you again for spending your valuable time with us. And remember to be a safe space, especially for yourself. Have a great day, everybody. thank you again for getting to the end of this podcast. And if you enjoyed this and you found that there was value in it for you, my invitation is for you to subscribe for future episodes that come out weekly on Tuesdays. Thank you again, and I'm looking forward to being with you next time. Now remember to be a safe space.